Okay, 6 o'clock, so I'm going to call this meeting to order, and we welcome everyone here tonight, and congratulations to the new candidates on their election results, and welcome you guys also, Mr. Seacrest. First, I need to adopt the agenda and the motion to do so. So move. Thank you, Monty. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Gina. Any discussion? All those in favor? So first, moving on to discussion item. We've got Gary Seacrest and Day of the Week. Okay. Presenting with Superintendent Search.
Okay, thank you very much. If you don't mind, I'll join you around the table so we can. If you happen to have your manual with you, if you would turn to page 35. Because we had started a search last spring and ended up being successful, but unfortunately it was an interim candidate, the board last time I met with, we felt like the characteristics were still appropriate. But I wanted to hand to each of you the characteristics that were defined at our last spring, so that you will be aware of this. And of course, this is we do our best to try to screen the candidates, match them to this particular skill set. I'm going to give you one also. Do you guys like to share an extra? Remember, we asked 4 questions, and the first question is very simple. What are the leadership and personal qualities you'd like to have in your new superintendent? And I wish to remind you, Chris, in case Mr. Wilford did not, when you see 17, that doesn't mean 17 individuals. That means 17 small groups within the focus group. So they would have been divided into 3 or 4 small groups. So of that particular question, the particular response that kind of came in front, obviously, was being approachable, somebody that can develop relationships, somebody that's trustworthy, great communicator, listener, and that family is very important. So Mr. Wilford obviously put some of those in the same. If we would do it again tomorrow, it may not be the same way. But number 2, with also 10 responses, was somebody that has integrity, they're fair to all employees, employee classifications. They always do what's right, and they're proactive and decisive. I won't go through all of those because those were the 2 that really stood out, but I think it's very important that you as a board do look through those, feel comfortable with those. I'd like you to also think about this evening when we're reviewing these, if you feel like they match the same traits that you might be looking for. That's important to us. The second question is simply what are the strengths and the good points of your school district, possibly your community, that you want your new superintendent to understand and support. And that came out, there was 2 with 10 different tallies. They would like the new superintendent to support the good reputation of the school, that you have a great staff, your staff seems to stick around for a while once they come. You've got great building principals, and you also have a supportive staff. So that is something that I would recommend to you at some point during the interview process, that you make sure your candidates are aware of those strengths. And then secondarily, community parent is very support. It's a close-knit community. It is obviously a rural culture, and you have financial support from your community. So please read through those. What do you think about those? Do those surprise you? Do those seem to match what you would believe your board would feel? The next question is a little bit different. Not a little bit. You know, when you talk about the good points, the next question is the challenges. But the challenges, I want you to think about a little bit different. If you read through that completely, what are the challenges that you want the new superintendent to understand and possibly address? Now, you notice I didn't say fix, but when because you know, you don't necessarily want your superintendent to be the fixer. I mean, they do fix things, but you'd rather other people fix them also. But with that said, these are the things that probably when your new superintendent comes on, they're going to hear about these pretty quick from somewhere. If it's not you as a board, somebody else. So with 9 tallies, finance is an issue, and that's very common around the state with that question. Financial literacy within the community, consolidation is always either a concern or something you're thinking about with regional schools. I think we're in public session and we're on the radio, so I need to be cautious about that. Bond projects, and then how the city and county share responsibilities or assist you folks with what you're doing. Then lastly, the last question is what we call the separating qualities question, and I like to say this is where the rubber meets the road. Let's really hope that you have great interviews, that two are so good that you're having a hard time deciding which one. This is the single trait that was given to us that you would hope the board would use when trying to decide between this great candidate and this great candidate. And it came up, 6 groups said somebody with energy and enthusiasm, they're outgoing, they're interactive, they're approachable to all, and they're willing to work with others. How does that sound close to what you as a board would also hope to have? So theoretically, this would be the question, if you're having a hard time breaking the tie, this would be the one that you would believe that you wish to think about and consider. So please go through those. The screen team will obviously look at these. We will screen the candidates based upon these characteristics. So the recommendations we will make to you in January will be based upon the persons that we believe best match these. And not by they told us that they match them from our vetting, our phone calls, our knowledge of these candidates. All right, so with that said, I have also done a superintendent salary comparison for you. And this is information that I will just give you. I would like to explain it to you. You'll know exactly what the information means. But when you are in the process of deciding what you plan on offering your candidate, this will be information that will be valuable to you. With that said, the columns, some of them are obvious, some of them are a little bit different. But column A is simply the USD number. B is the district name. C is the enrollment. D is the year of the information. So if you can see, obviously Lincoln is 1920, but you may see an 1819, which means that district did not update their information. It's still there. It may not, it's probably not completely accurate, but at least gives you an idea. E is the base salary. So all of these comparisons are based upon line E. F is the fringe benefit, so the monthly benefit times 12. So although we filtered this using just the base salary, if you added those two together, it would probably be a whole different order, but we just do it on the base salary. G is obviously the total. H is the KASD region, which may or may not be important to you. I is the classification, so that is starting to identify school districts which are similar in size of enrollment. J means if you see the word true, which you do under Lincoln, that means they are an interim superintendent. K, if you see true under that, that means they are Capers retired. L, if you see a true in that column, that means they are also performing principal duties with their superintendent duties. M simply means the years that this particular superintendent has been the superintendent in that district. The next column is how many total years they have been a superintendent. So under Lincoln you see 0 because at that point when that was filled out in September, it hadn't been one yet, but Dr. Summers has been a superintendent for 20 years her whole career. And then lastly is the contract length. So those are days. Now if you see a 2, well, that's a pretty good gig for that superintendent, but they put years. So it'll be like a 2-year contract as opposed to how many days their contract length is for that particular year. So depending on how the person wrote that down, so if you see a really, really small number, if it's 3 or less, they're talking about they have a 3-year contract, a 2-year contract, or a 1-year contract. If you see the larger numbers, that's the number of days they have in their contract they work per year. With that said, the first graph on the first page where it says 15 higher, 15 lower, the 15, you can see that Lincoln's right in the middle, and that's for a reason. The salaries above that are the 15 directly lower than the Lincoln salary. Then the 15 underneath Lincoln are the ones that are directly higher. So those are 31 school districts that are bundled together, all right? So you can look at the classification, you can look at the head count, and just start getting an idea where you're at. The next one is your Northern Plains League. So in that particular instance, right now, if you would go by the base salary, the base salary, that you're pretty much right in the middle of that particular one. You're looking at some of those others, and you can see really small amounts. And the reason those are really small amounts is sometimes the people will say, well, they're making $27,000 to be our superintendent, and they're making $60,000 to be our principal. And they just don't put that in there. Or they're a part-time superintendent. You know, they're only working 1 or 2 days a week and sharing another district or retired, whatever it may be. So I may not have a particular story for some of these, but that's the most common cause when you see an extremely small number. Go to the next page, and the next page, because there is a lot of 1A districts. This is every 1A school district in the state. And I have highlighted where Lincoln is, so you can see probably right on the bottom of the top third, right on the top of the middle third. Most likely I didn't count them, but getting pretty darn close in there. If you see a yellow highlight, that was done by our researcher. That simply means that was not self-reported, that he had to go out and find the information off the KSDE website. So it's not really confirmed. So I'll tell you this now, since we're talking about salary. You can offer each of your candidates that you interview a different amount. You know, you don't have to offer the same amount to each candidate. It's kind of a secret, but you don't have to know. The candidates probably know that too. We will provide you how much the candidates presently make. So you will know that when they come, if they're making $72,000 as a principal and you're going to offer this, that's a nice little increase. Or, oh gosh, they're already making 72 and we're only going to offer 73.5, that's probably not going to work. You know, so you need to think about those things. I also will remind you that night, but I want you to think about before the interview week. And please don't wait until the interview week, because it leads to bad decisions. I'm just not this board, because you always make good decisions. But that last night, when you say we're going to offer to Mr. Seacrest, and heaven don't do that. What should we offer? Well, now you're in a hurry because you'd like to get that phone call made, and now you're trying to think in a panic what we're going to offer. What we recommend to you is that sometime, maybe tonight or at your December meeting, that you have a discussion, that you come up with a range of salaries that you will feel comfortable with. And when I give you this range, I'm not saying this is what you should offer, so I'm just giving you round numbers. That we're willing to offer anywhere from $92,000 to $97,500. Something like that. So the candidate that comes in here that has the least experience, maybe they're going to get the offer of 92. And then you leave it to your board president when the phone call's being made and they say 93.5, if you can make that 95,000, I'm your man or woman. And you leave it up to him, and you're happy when he says yes because it's done, and you're not the person that has to do that. So you understand that. Nobody wants to be put in that position. So you're going to be sitting in that meeting, Vice President. But I will remind these items to you the next night I'm here when I make the recommendation. So, but you do need to start thinking about a salary range. Don't wait until, like I said, that week of the interviews, because it leads to a hurried decision, and you're not in consensus a lot of times. So your information, to do with what you need to. We don't get into that part of it with you. Greta sent me, last year you had already selected interview questions. You may or may not want to use the same questions. I don't know if you want to change them. That's a discussion that you can have yet tonight. But I took the liberty of looking at the tallies that she provided me, and I put the questions, the 21 questions, maybe it was 20, that you selected on a piece of paper. So you don't have to do it in front of me either, because you're paid by the hour. No, you're not. But these were the questions that the board selected last spring when you were going through the process. If you say those are great, hallelujah. If they're not, we'll have to figure out a system that we want to add 2 questions, and either get rid of 2 questions, or we're going to end up having 23 or 24 questions. So I'll let you decide, but they're in front of you. If you had not done this process, if you remember right, I would have recommended to you that you go through the questions, which are in the back of your manual. You all pick the 21 questions that you would like to ask, and then you would have sent them to Greta, which she did, and then she tallies. And then I just simply went through, I don't normally do this, but I wanted to have them in front of you, that I think it ended up being 20 because it was a natural end with the tallies. Yeah.
And then we added something.
And if you did, I'm not aware of that, so hopefully Greta might, or somebody can remember what that is. So I just went through the tallies. Okay. Then the very last page are the questions that you all know about, but these are the questions you cannot ask the candidates. The candidates are they know you can't ask those questions, so they're going to find a way to tell you. So they want you to know they have children. They want you to know they're married. You know, they want you to know as much as they can. But, so they'll find a way to tell you that. But please do not ask those questions. If you ask how old I am and I don't get the job, first of all, I'm not too unhappy about it. But, well, they asked me how old, and the guy who got the job is 45, must have been age discrimination. Or it must have been because I don't have kids and they do, because they ask those types of questions. Or he's Lutheran and this one's not. So that's why it's really fun to be careful. All right, so that's the information I'd like to put in front of you. There's some things that you have to have concluded by interview week, and we're great timing. You can talk about them tonight, and get them, or you can see them off in your December meeting, whatever works best for the board. But you need to think about the following items. What's an interview day look like? And Greta, once again, I'm going to ask you, do you remember if the board had even started that discussion last year?
No.
Okay. An interview day, for those of you that were part of it maybe 3 or 4 years ago, is in the evening would be board. So when we say an interview day, you really only have to be available for the evening, because the rest of the day or the afternoon, whatever you choose, is activities of which they're learning more about your community and staff, and then the formal interviews in the evening. In a school district of this size, this is something you need to consider. We would highly recommend they have an opportunity to sit down with your office staff and your building principals. Once again, there's no right or wrong on this. You could decide, because it's a pretty small group in Lincoln, that it could be the same meeting, because I'm assuming there's 2 principals and 2 office staff. Is that 3 here?
3 office staff.
So that could be a meeting, or you could just have the office staff and your 2 principals in another meeting. Sometimes, depending on how busy you're going to have them in the afternoon, you have them come at noon, and that meeting could be sandwiches, and you just sit around, and Greta would never do this, but it's not an interview, it's just to get to know you, get a feel for the candidate. We will highly recommend that they have the opportunity to bring a guest. It could be a husband or wife, or it could be a friend or something, but you'll definitely say you're more than welcome to bring a guest, and they'll always say on the phone, great, I'll bring my wife or my husband or whatever it is, and you already know something about them that you can't ask about. But let's just think about how this works. So let's start from noon. Let's just say that it's going to be a luncheon. So So about 45 minutes after that, you're going to give them a tour of your community and your school system. Now, this is a question that has to be identified at some point. Who is going to give the tour? We would recommend, but we will never tell you not to, but we would say it should not be a board member.
Dr. Betty.
Yeah, and she would be great. But I never want to suggest a superintendent, because as you can well know, sometimes, not like this one, it's fractured, so that's not good. But Dr. Betty would be fantastic. You would want to think about certain things. Don't just drive around town and let them see whatever they want, which you can. Obviously, you want them to see what they want to see, but try to have some sort of idea. Driving by your parks and recreation opportunities. First of all, you can't ask them if they have children. But when you're driving by a Little League baseball park, it's very likely, oh, Johnny loves Little League baseball. Oh, great. You got K-18 baseball? Oh, fantastic. You know, those types of things. Make sure you go by the movie theater. There's not too many communities of your side that are fortunate enough to have a movie theater, the art gallery. You have a clothing store. That doesn't happen too often in a school district of your size. You need to be cautious in this. You're not going to tell them you're doing this, but you're going to drive them by every street that happens to have a church on it. But you're not going to tell them, we're getting ready to drive by the Lutheran church, we're getting ready to drive by but you're going to make sure they are looking. That may not be important to them, but it may be. And maybe, hey, I happen to see a Baptist church and a Methodist church and a Catholic church. Do you happen to have a Lutheran church? Yeah, 5 of them. Yeah, we'll drive by a couple of them if you'd like us to. So it's a strategic tour, if you know what I mean. All right? Then you definitely, because you have 2 attendance centers, the secondary school and the elementary, you need to go into both buildings. Dr. Betty, we would recommend that she doesn't necessarily give the tour of the buildings. She may escort them into the office and maybe follow, but your principal typically then would lead that tour. It doesn't have to be your principal. Sometimes it might be the principal, but there's a couple of kids that are walking around and really add some flavor. I mean, I'm just telling you that's an idea. You don't have to do it. It's got to be the right students, of course. You do not have to show them every classroom in your elementary school, because as we all know, they pretty much all look alike. But if you know of some wonderful programs, something special that your district's doing that you're very proud of, make sure they see that. Not only in the elementary, but in the high school. Obviously, people's going to notice how they interact with kids in the hallway. Do they move off to the side when kids are coming to them, or do they gravitate towards them? Do they reach out? Do they ask how they're doing? And just because they don't doesn't mean they're not a bad candidate, but it's just an overall feel of what you're trying to get during those tours. After the tours, it may be, and we'll have to count back, or you guys will have to count back. Well, maybe we can do all this and start at 1 and don't have to have lunch. That'll be a decision you'll want to make. But at about, does anybody remember what time school is dismissed? Your last the school dismissal time? 3:30, 3:15?
It's done at 3:45.
Okay. So we would highly recommend that at some point after school that you would have a reception for the staff and each candidate. So if the last school is dismissed at 3:45, and Dr. Betty, your principals would know they need 15 minutes to get to a location. So let's just say in the high school auditorium, could be, or the library or the cafeteria, that the staff is invited to a public reception to meet the candidate and their guest. That might be the first time the board president meets them. You might be the one that introduces them, or you'll say, no, I think I'm just going to wait until dinner and Dr. Summers can introduce them. But that's when we would recommend that possibly it could be the first time a board member meets them and they would introduce them. You want to really make sure it ends up not being an interview by the staff because it ends up being somebody in the back row yells out, what do you think about Common Core? What do you think about whatever? And all of a sudden they're a little on defensive. I like Common Core, but this person obviously not, so they're already defensive. Usually it's not that way. I like to call it a wedding reception type of thing. You know, here's who I am, here's what I believe, and then there's just, everybody comes up to me, oh, you're from Paola? I have a cousin in Paola. You know how that works, everybody. So you would not like that to go more than 45 minutes, for example. So if it starts at 4, it may be done at 4:45. Greta, remember, you unfortunately, you and I will either be friends or not friends because you have a lot of responsibility in this search.
You've done it enough times.
So I'm not giving you anything that's going to surprise her. We would recommend that you offer a motel room to the candidates. And from what, if I remember right, a couple of years ago, the hotel had just gone through a renovation, so it's very nice.
Very nice.
So the night that you call the candidates, and we'll go over this a little bit clearer, but that's when you say, we would really like for you to stay in our community. If you're willing, we'd be happy to give you a motel, and they'll either tell you, yeah, or no, I don't need one. But knowing when the interview dates, it might be smart to get them reserved now, and you can always cancel, because it'd be embarrassing if you don't have a room for them when they thought they needed one. But if they're done at 4:45, that would be an opportunity that you could tell the candidate and their guest, we don't need to see you until 5:30 for dinner. So you got 45 minutes. You can either check into your hotel, you can go drive around the community, whatever you'd like to do, but we need to see you at 5:30 at here or wherever you're going to have the interview and the meal. Usually it's in the same location, but once again, it doesn't have to be. So at 5:30 would be the meal, and that is executive session. So the interview nights are special meetings, so Grady, you'll have to notice the public as you always do. Make sure they're special meetings. You cannot amend the agenda, and of course it would be superintendent interview nights is why, because it's personnel. They're going to be telling you things that should not be privy to the public quite yet. The meal is very informal. You can have a different meal every night, that way you're not bored, the candidates have no idea, but so you can have a different meal. You know the culture and the politics of your community. Do you offer a different restaurant every night, or you only have one caterer, so that's who's going to do it? You know your community well enough. Many boards have gone this way, that they may have the meal right here in this room. It might be a buffet style, it might be served out there, and when the meal's over with, let's say at 6:15 to 6:30, it's real easy to push everything out, and the room is ready for the interview. Typically, you go get a little 10 or 15 minute break between the meal and the formal interview. We would highly recommend that the guest is part of everything until the formal interview. So they're part of the tour, the reception, and the meal. Our experience is the spouses have ruined the interviews quite a few times. Either the candidate looks at them to, how should I answer this, or they answer the question rather than the candidate, and it's not a good situation. But once again, it's your decision. It would be our recommendation you not. And it's real easy, TJ, because when you make the phone calls, when you're inviting the guest, right there on that spot, you're going, fantastic. He or she's welcome to participate in everything until a formal interview. And that way you've already taken care of it. They're not wondering when they drive here, should I get lunch before we get here? Because you're going to tell them, no, we're going to have sandwiches at noon, and we're going to have a meal for you, or whatever. There's no question. Because otherwise, all day long, what am I supposed to do the next thing? You know, they don't know. So once again, it looks like you're taking care of them as opposed to leaving it up. So it's a good look. The interview may start at about 6:30. Get through your 21 questions, and you go home. Then the next day, or whatever you're scheduled. Questions so far? There's 14 openings, by the way, already.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. All right, so what I would recommend to you folks is to look through the interview questions. You can either decide to look at it when you come back to the December meeting, let's get this ironed out, have it looked at, you can do it tonight. Have a discussion at some point about your salary range. Motels are going to be taken care of. As you well know, the potential interview dates are January 7 through 10. So at least this board has put those, we need all 7 board members there, because this is the most important decision you guys will make. Who's going to lead your district to the next step? So, with that said, this is a little bit easier because you've kind of had the processes started last spring, so you kind of know what's going on. I'm sure I bored you because you heard this last April or May. Oh, no, you're not supposed to shake your head and agree on it. Sorry. So actually, we have already got through phase 2 and into phase 3 a little bit, so you can see we're trying to make this painless for you. And so Greta, your job, of course, is to get the hotel, and the board can either say, Greta, it's your responsibility to have the 3 or 4 nights of meals, or we want you to do this restaurant, this restaurant, this restaurant, give us some direction.
I was gonna say that she cooked all the meals the last time, it was very nicely done.
Who did?
The cook.
And that's very common,
Yes.
because, yeah.
Yes, she does an excellent job.
Great.
Yes,
Well,
she
thank you.
did it last time.
I have to be, I can say, because it's my sister, so.
She did a wonderful meal.
Yeah, she did a good job, but I thought that she did all the last.
Mr. Johnson, is it okay if I ask the new board members if they have any questions? Because they're going to be part of this very last part of it. Any questions that you may have?
We were just discussing so the interview dates are going to be looking at January 7th through 10th. We won't actually be on the board at that time,
Yeah.
so how will we
they won't
engage
be
in this
because of the
process?
13th. Yeah, so when we do, the board can involve new board members as much as they want to. We would be very cautious in that regard, not that I know they're trustworthy. I know that.
Elected, so.
Yes.
Yeah, but they're just not board members quite yet. You might want to include them in, maybe when they're meeting with the principals and the office staff, have them kind of part there so they're meeting with staff, and then you could inquire of them, what do you think of the 3 candidates? That's up to this board. I hope you understand that. It's up to this board, but whatever they decide to do is right. It's correct. So that'll be a decision on how you would like to include the new board or not. Yeah. And this is the unfortunate circumstance with new board members coming in January, not July. It really makes it awkward, very awkward. Because if you wait too much, somebody's hiring your best candidate because you're waiting 2 weeks.
Okay, does anybody else have any questions for Dr. Seacrest?
I have a request. On your you have an executive session for personnel. If I could be part of that for 2 or 3 minutes and leave also, because what I would like to visit with you is a personnel issue.
Okay.
All right, and I'll leave before you get to your other issues.
Okay. Okay, well, thank you, Dr. Seacrest.
Yeah.
We will and won't see you again before the state.
You will not see me again until the night that or the day we screen the candidates and the night we make the recommendation. But obviously, call, email me if you have any questions in between. Your job is posted, if you haven't been aware, so it's been posted now. It was one of the 2 original, the first 2 of all of the openings that have been posted. So.
So next we can executive session for personnel for 10 minutes. Need a motion to do so. Yolanda, Patty, any discussion? Motion by Rhonda, seconded by Patty, that usually Henry 98 Board of Education, going to executive session at 6:35 for 10 minutes with the superintendent and Dr. Gary Seacrest in attendance for the purpose of discussing personnel matter for non-elected personnel. The board return to open meeting at 6:45 in this room. The executive session is required to protect the privacy interest of the viable individual.
Yes.
Dr. Bailey,